Hello everyone, it's Brett here, Lionheart 84, and at last we have a glorious day to celebrate. The sun's out, it's warm, the cold spell's over, and we're going to have some warm weather for the next few days, hopefully warm sunny weather. And today is the 3rd of September and it's the first Sunday of the month, so it's time for my for the garden tour and to see how things have been developing since the beginning of August. So quite pleased with how some things are doing, so I thought we'll have a quick walk around, well not a quick walk around, a lengthy walk around, and let you see what's what. So starting as I normally do on the left hand border, kiwi berries growing like mad this year. Hoping I'm going to have flowers on my one or two of my other ones next year, so we get fruits on it. Obviously no fruits this year, although it was covered in flowers, because it's not a self-fertile plant, sadly. That's life. So looking at the ornamentals, the daphne as usual is covered in flowers. Looking over the back, my variegated Chilean guava, which I thought was starting to come back after being killed back the cold, has now died, so it didn't recover. Sometimes they just don't recover from the cold damage, so that'll give some more space for the other plants to grow around the back. I don't think I'll plant anything else there because it doesn't get a lot of light. I could possibly squeeze in a pineapple guava if I cut the daphne back a bit. So carrying on the walk around, the medlars are doing very nicely. They don't get much bigger than this. This is about their peak size, possibly a little bit smaller, but this plant's absolutely still loaded in medlars. It's dropped one or two, but most of them have stayed on, so there's going to be should be a good crop of those this year to try making this medlar jelly. Still got some blueberries ripening on the variety that's the latest. They get a little bit, they're not very sweet this time of the year, and they tend to be a bit undersized, but you can still obviously pick them should you so wish and use them on your cereals or on a fruit salad. Tucked away behind here, what I hope is still Myers lemon. It does look as if this shoot has come from above where the graft is, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be the rootstock. It's not easy to tell, but we'll only know when it flowers one day eventually. But it's put out strong growth, and it's continuing to put out strong growth, so it has, even if it's just the rootstock that survived, I could always graft back onto it if I wanted to in the future, so all is not lost. There's no other shoots coming out from it. Unfortunately, there's no other shoots coming out from it. There's a shoot on the right hand side that hasn't sprouted out, but that's not to say it won't send out more shoots at a later stage, and I'll have to watch out if any come from lower down, because there definitely will be the rootstock. Excuse me. A couple of medlars have dropped, no big deal, no need to worry about them because there's plenty on the plant. Mulberries starting to go into dormancy now. They start to go yellow this time of the year. This is I think this one is Carmen. That's the one that produces the white fruits. It hasn't grown much, to be honest. It probably needs a larger pot, so that'll be a winter job to repot that. Moving on to the first of my pineapple guavas. This is the one that's labelled as a mammoth. No reason to believe it's not a mammoth. Some of the fruits are getting to be a decent size to the beginning of September. They're about on schedule. There is quite a variation in sizes. There's a few decent sized ones, but there's a little group, I think I saw of them in here. There's two there. I think somewhere else I saw another batch of, not sure where they've gone now. There's another batch there of 4 fruits. I have thinned the plant, as I said I would, but I'm going to leave those, and there are smaller ones as well, which I think will still get to be an edible size by the end of October. We'll see how they go, but I'm pleased with their development. That's the main one. The other blueberries are finished fruiting now, so they're just got a little bit of growth coming on them. This is my unnamed seedling pineapple guava. Produced no fruits last year at all, but this year it produces round, virtually golf ball shaped and sized fruits. There weren't any edible ones last year, they weren't any bigger than cherries, but at the rate this is doing this year, looks to me like this might produce some edible ones. They weren't particularly tasty fruits the first time it fruited, but perhaps if we get some larger fruits this year, if they're bigger than golf ball size, perhaps they will be edible. There's quite a variation in sizes on them, smaller ones like that. Behind there is my in-ground persimmon. It's an Asian persimmon, but it's a seedling plant. Flowered this year, but it only had male flowers, so unless it starts to develop female ones in the future, because some of them do carry both types of flowers, it's not much use to me at all. But that unfortunately is what happens when you plant these unnamed seedlings as far as persimmons grow. I could cut it back hard and graft other varieties on it, and I might consider doing that, because it's really pointless to have a large tree growing here. But what I'd do is probably cut it back really hard in winter, and then top work it with some scions off my other plants. Next to it is the forgot its name now, terrible, should be able to remember the name of these plants. This is an ornamental plant, a subtropical plant. Hasn't flowered this year because it got cut back by the cold. Oh, Caesalpinia, that's it. It's got lovely leaves, but it normally flowers quite heavily, and this year we didn't get any flowers because it was cut back by the cold weather very badly, because they're only semi-hardy. Tucked away behind there is a named pawpaw that's been in the ground now for 5 years and barely growing a foot. That's a sunflower. It is very shady behind the pomegranate, unfortunately. This is my unnamed pomegranate. Has still got the one fruit on it, probably about getting close to 2 inches in size. Still don't know if it's going to get to an edible size or ripen. That remains to be seen. It had a lot of flowers on it, but only the ones set fruit, but that's good because it'll be putting all its energy into this, and we'll see if this swells in the next 2 months. Moving past that, my in-ground bottle brush did die, started to come back from the base, but the shoots died off. Could have been drought, lack of water, or just the frost damage to the roots that it never recovered from, unfortunately. Next to that I've got my butterfly bush, which has been flowering nicely, and behind it you can probably see the splashes of reddish orange from the Campsis. That's been flowering well as well. Here we move to my next in-ground named pineapple guava. This one is Triumph. Fruits are very small on it this year so far, because I cut the plant back very heavily in the spring, which means the fruits have been very late developing. The ones that it's got on it, it's probably got about 7 or 8 fruits on, but they're much smaller than on the Mammoth, so I don't know what sort of size they're going to reach by the end of October, beginning of November, when they normally ripen. They will be an edible size. And it's funny, every year the embryo fruits seem to vary in shape. These are more pear-shaped. Other years they've been round, and then they've been elongated. I've no idea why the young fruits vary so much in shape. Very strange. Had a few flowers low down, but I can't see any fruits low down, so it hasn't got many on it this year. It said it's literally going to be probably about 7 or 8 fruits, but that's the price you pay for cutting the plant back heavily, but it's not really a problem. My in-ground seedling pawpaw has got some fruits on it still. They're not large, they're very small this year. I don't know why that should be. Well, when I say small, they're not as big as I would have expected, and it's produced in its first year, but it didn't have any last year at all. I mean, it's a large enough tree that you would think it would produce larger fruits than that. These are about 2 inches long. They probably won't be ready until the beginning of October, so we have got a whole month. So if the weather's suitable, they might fill out a lot more. But as you can see, the problem is the leaves are starting to go yellow at this time of year, which means it's going into dormancy. This is the grafted stem on it. This one is Allegheny. One stem didn't take and that's died. The one above it is still alive, but very weedy growth compared to the rest of the plant. There's another grafted shoot over here which is better. That's this one here. This one is Shenandoah. No flower buds on the growth, but at least the growth seems healthier than that other cutting. And walking around the plant, there's another fruit here, and there's another little group of 3 or 4 small fruits here. They're going to be an edible size, but there's not going to be much flesh on them, but it's better than no fruit at all as far as I can see. Moving further around, this is my Luma apiculata. Has flowered again heavily. Once again, no fruit set. All these little the remains of the flowers are dropping off, just as they did in this first batch earlier in the year. It's obviously not self-fertile for whatever reason. Just disturbing Mr. Spider. My in-ground Chilean guavas. This is the one that was killed back to the ground. This was kapow, and there's the new kapow I planted behind it to replace the yuzu that died, so that's doing okay. Got the mulberry in front of it in a pot. Again, needs up potting. They get root bound very quickly, these mulberries, unfortunately. Not ideal container plants. We just wander through the back here. We can see my Passiflora incarnata, or maypop, is still growing very nicely. Never any fruit set on it because I haven't got anything to cross-pollinate it with, unfortunately, so it doesn't set fruits, and there are obviously no compatible passion flowers close enough here for the bees to bring the pollen to, but at least it's still flowering nicely. It's growing into my neighbour's gutter, but that's not really a problem because these die back in winter anyway, so it won't have any effect on his little shed. My in-ground strawberry guava, don't know if it's a yellow or red one. It was an unnamed plant that I bought a few years ago from a UK nursery. They actually had it labelled as Basidium guajava, which it isn't. Can't remember if they called it a yellow or red variety. Probably didn't say either. So that was the one that died back to the grounds completely last winter, and that's recovered really nicely, so I'm pleased about that. Put on about 18 inches of growth. Obviously this growth is very soft, so I'm going to have to protect that heavily this winter if we get the same sort of weather we had last year. Next to it I've got my in-ground avocado. This one's a bacon. It died back to about 4 inches above the ground last winter, but not outside. It was in my summer house, but I decided to, as I had 3 or 4 spare, I thought I'd stick one in the ground and see if it survived the winter with some protection. Moving into my trees at the back here, pomegranate is coming up from the tree that died, is coming up from the base. It's a Molar Delch, and I'm thinking that as it almost certainly would have been grown from a cutting, I have to assume that this is the same variety at the base. I don't think it would be a grafted plant, so that's promising because it means I can grow that as a bush. Wandering around the back, got one persimmon at the back here that's got a tiny little fruit on it. Hasn't dropped off. Don't know what the variety is supposed to be, Hanafuyu, but the leaves look nothing like Hanafuyu, so I think it's going to be another mislabelled, missold plant. Going to walk around, have a quick look at my Asian pears, my Shinziki. They've all been a disaster this year. All of the Shinziki got caterpillars inside them, which meant the fruits, and you can see that's fallen off. The fruits were stunted. I should have bagged them early in the season. They've all had bugs inside them, which means there are tiny little fruits that ripened and fell off prematurely. The one that I cut back, which is my Hong Li, seems to have recovered very nicely. may get fruits on it next year. My little pot grown jujubes, I've got a Lee and a Lang, have flowered. Didn't set any fruits. It's been much too cool this year. One of my pot grown pawpaw has got the same mottled leaves on it that Mike's got. If you happen to be watching this, Mike, I've got the same problem with this one. This is growing in a pot. I believe this is not a virus. I think it's some kind of nutrient deficiency, because obviously I've got it in a container, so the roots are restricted, and they don't like growing in pots anyway because they have a deep taproot system. This one is my let's have a look and see what varieties. I can't remember. This one's a Pennsylvania Golden, did flower this year, didn't set any fruit. Next to it I've got my pot grown Prima. Leaves aren't too bad on that one, but there is still some problems with nutrient deficiency in it, plus also it's the end of the growing season. They probably start to go dormant now. This one does have a few small fruits on it, so I should, come the end of September, beginning of October, get some small edible fruits on it. Just a quick glance at a couple of my persimmons. This one's developing nicely. This is Costata, quite an elongated shaped fruit. One of the problems I've got with growing in them containers is the fruits are undersized compared to the ones you get planted in ground, but the problem is I've got nowhere to plant them in ground unless I get rid of a load of trees, which I don't want to do. I'd probably have to get rid of 3/4 of my trees to plant a handful actually in this ground where they're all standing in pots, so I don't want to be doing that if possible. This is allegedly a Nikita's gift. Don't know if it is. It's still got these little curled twisted leaves that look like they've got virus on it, which they always have. There's a more promising persimmon there for a pot grown one. That's a Muscat. That's an Asian persimmon. The plant itself looks a bit stunted, but the fruit surprisingly are quite a good size. Now, just going to walk through back to my lawn. There's a muddy patch because my garden's suffering from flooding. Water won't drain away. Now, one of the problems I've got with some of the figs this year, which has sort of thrown me a bit because we've had a very cold spell, is some of them are going into dormancy very early. I mean, this is the 3rd of September, and this fig, all the leaves have gone yellow. Now, that might be an issue with the water in the pot. Might be too dry, might be too wet, could be a nutrient deficiency, but basically the leaves are turning yellow, which is an indication of dormancy. Some of the others are fine. This one is, I think, either Goutte d'Or or Verdone. One of these is a Verdone. It's got main crop figs on it, but with the cold spell we've been having, I'm not altogether sure. I doubt if any of these are going to reach maturity, because we've only got about 3 or 4 weeks growing left now, especially not when you see that one's gone into dormancy. Most of these have got what should be main crop figs on them, but basically none of them are going to reach an edible stage or size. You can just about see at the back there some more persimmons. I think that one, that's a Fuyu. That one up there is a Chocolatino, and I think the one next to it is a Russian Beauty, or maybe the Morris Burton, not sure now. Some of these American persimmons only produce persimmons about 1.5 inches wide anyway at full maturity, so they're doing fine really. Some more of my pineapple guavas, pot grown ones. This one here hasn't set any fruits at all for whatever reason, or if it has, they're hidden away, but it was late flowering for whatever reason. There's my Che hidden away in there, Chinese mulberry, that's looking okay. Yeah, a lot of these figs seem to be going into very early dormancy here, and none of these have got any fruits on them either. So they haven't produced, some of them haven't produced Brabers, and some of them didn't have any main crop figs on. But to be fair, they're very small plants, so it's not totally a surprise, and they are very restricted in the pot. So I think I'll have to look at repotting some of them for next year. Now this pineapple guava, on the other hand, this is Marion, and this one has got quite a decent fruit set on it. They're nowhere near as big as the Mammoth, but I believe Marion is a much smaller variety anyway, so I'm only expecting to get fruits about the size of small eggs on this one, which will be fine. I don't know what the flavours like on Marion, probably tastes exactly the same as all the others, but it certainly has it's supposed to be an earlier or heartier variety, which is why people like to get it if they can, but whether or not the fruits are any different is another matter. Next to the Marion, I've got my Lotus Persimmon. I've still got a handful of fruits that have held, very tiny, not considered to be very edible, but we will taste them if they make it ripeness. And behind the Marion is one of my 2 loquats. These are grafted onto quince rootstocks to keep them dwarf, which has worked. I've also got them in big fabric pots, which probably restricts their growth. Lots of new growth on it. I'm hoping that my 2 loquats might produce a few flowers this year. Down there is the only variegated Chilean guava I've still got that wasn't killed by the cold. It did get cold damage last year, but it was obviously sheltered here under the loquats, and it seems to be doing quite well. Behind that is another pineapple guava. That one's Nikita. That one's got quite a few fruit set on it. Again, they're only about ½ an inch maximum in size at the moment, but I'm expecting them again to reach about an egg size. Supposed to be a particularly nice fruiting variety. Next to Nikita is my flat peach. That's doing quite nicely. Here is my other loquat. This one is, let me have a look at the name. This one is the Mrs. Cookson, which means the other one is Oliver. Again, it's had lots of new growth, and it's putting out more new growth now. Whether or not it flowers, we will find out obviously in late October into November, and then we'll have to see if we get a mild winter that keeps it in good condition. My grafted persimmon is still holding on. This is the Fuyu grafted onto, I think, a lotus rootstock, despite the fact that the graft is extremely weak and thin there. It still seems to be holding on, so I'll be careful with it and see what happens. Still getting some flowers on my, I've forgotten what it's called now, Calycanthus. That's the one I repotted, and that's flowered and growing really well. Look at the size of these leaves on this Calycanthus. Really healthy after its repot. My in-ground, this is Issai, Kiwi Berry Issai. This is growing quite nicely this summer. Taking a bit of a time because it's a north-facing fence, but it is doing quite well. Let's walk through here and see how my sausage chocolate vine's doing. Looking good. Look at that. They're not far off, starting to change colour now. That's my Akebia quinata. In fact, there's one there. Look at that. That's a monster. Shan't give you an idea of the size. Let's see. I don't think it'll fall off. Look at that. Huge. Starting to change colour now, which means that's going to split open soon and be ready to eat. There's more tucked away up underneath here. Look, there's several. There's quite a lot there actually. It's whether or not I can find anything useful to do with them. Look, there's plenty under there, and I don't doubt there's loads on the other side of my neighbour's side, but I'm not bothered about those. They can have the ornamental fruit as far as I'm concerned. My another one of my Asian pears. This one's Nijisiki, which I think is the same as 20th century. Mulberry going dormant. Next to it is my apricot, which I'm very happy with. That's looking great. That was the early Moore Park. That's looking really healthy. I think we'll see flowers on that next year. Down here is another pineapple guava. Let's see how this one's looking. This one is Triumph, and this has got much better fruits on it than my other Triumph. Sorry, my throat's bad today. Quite good fruit set on this one. Look, there's plenty of fruits down there. So even though the other one's not fruiting well, probably going to have about a dozen fruits on this Triumph, I think. And behind it we've got a Mammoth. That's running way behind the other mammoth because it flowered late, but nevertheless it's got enough fruits on it that I think, again, there's a good chance these could make it to at least egg size by the time they ripen at the end of October. And because it's running later than the other one, it may well be that the fruits will develop a week or two later as well. My little goji berry got its first flowers on it in September. Another pineapple guava here. This one is Gemini, and again this has got some quite decent fruit progress on this one this year. Looking around it, it's got plenty of fruits on it, probably another plant with a dozen fruits. So it looks like we're going to have a taste of some decent sized Gemini fruits this year. And just wandering around, so I think that's basically all we've got to look at. We can have a quick look at my in-ground fig here. It's got a lot of figs on it, but I'm going to do a separate video on this because they're dropping very quickly, possibly because of the strange weather we've had. So I think it's quite likely I might unfortunately not get any main crop figs on it this year, but we'll see. And finally, my blue sausage tree, they don't do well for me. It's hardly grown this year, unfortunately. Behind it, the Japanese raisin tree has done nicely. I've repotted it, which set it back a bit, but it's still put on good growth. I don't know how big they have to be to fruit, but I'm obviously hopeful that I might see some flowers on it next year to see what they look like if it doesn't get frosted by early frosts. So that's the overview of the garden. Doesn't take long to do a tour, but it still stretches out when I look at the video into 25 minutes, unfortunately. So sorry for people who don't like long videos, but you can always fast forward through it anyway. But at least there's plenty happening, and I'm particularly excited again this year about the pineapple guavas. They're doing really well for me, and I should have a fair number of decent edible fruits to try and feature in videos by the end of October or beginning of November, which is about the time they ripen for me here. So thanks for watching that video. If you've managed to stick with it, much appreciate it. Please give me a thumbs up. Obviously subscribe to my channel. You can share the video if you think anybody might be interested in what you can try and grow in UK gardens or cool climate parts of America. And click on the bell if you'd like to know when new videos come out, so you can catch up with what's happening here. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, that's my Szechuan pepper tree, and it's nearly got ripe berries on it, which will be the Szechuan peppers. This is going to flower and fruit heavily next year, but I'm very pleased with how it's done this year. Anyway, thanks for watching the video and sticking by it. I will catch up with you in my next video, which will be a normal short one. See you all soon. Brett out for now.